So we offer 3-year postdoctoral fellowships. So these fellowships are for applicants who already hold a PhD. They don't have to have the PhD finished by the time they apply. They only have to have the degree deferred by the time they start the fellowship, but they can apply while they're still doing their PhD studies. I mean, the mission or the aims of the fellowship program is to support talented postdocs who want to change scientific paradigms by proposing new and risky projects that brings them maybe outside their comfort zone. I mean, a biophysicist is probably not very comfortable at the beginning to work in a biological lab, but this is exactly what we want to facilitate, to encourage people to take some risk without, you know, having to produce any results within the first 1 or 2 years or something like this. And to bring specific and very unique kind of experiences, skills and tools to a new problem, because that's all about cross-disciplinarity and interdisciplinarity, to move outside your comfort zone. And you as an applicant or an awardee will gain a lot from being exposed to different ways of thinking and new methodologies, but you're also bringing a very different kind of mindset and skill set to your host lab. And there are 3-year postdoctoral fellowships. There are 2 sub-programs in our fellowship schemes. There is one program called long-term fellowships, which is for applicants who hold a PhD in a life science field, like in biology, for example, and who want to change their field of research and then move into another field of the life sciences. And then the second sub-program, which is maybe more interesting for you, is the cross-disciplinary fellowships. They're also 3 years, so they're also long-term, and they have the exact amount of money and the exact amount, or the exact same conditions, but they're called cross-disciplinary fellowships because they're intended for PhDs who hold a degree from outside the life sciences, for example, from physics, from chemistry, from engineering, from mathematics, and who want to apply their specific skills to a problem in the life sciences. You have to have a biological question in the background. It cannot be a physicist applying to do a purely physical postdoc. It has to be, for example, a biophysicist or a physicist applying his physical background to address a biophysical or a biological problem.
Okay, perfect.
But it can also be, for example, sorry if I interrupt, it can also be, for example, tool development. Like if an engineer wants to develop a microscope or something like that to address a biological problem, that's also totally fine, even though this person will never work with an animal, for example. There are a few, of course, eligibility criteria. So first of all, you have to be within 3 years of having obtained your PhD. So if you obtained your PhD 5 years ago, you are no longer eligible. You have to change countries. You cannot propose a project in the same country where you did your PhD, for example, or of which you are a national. For example, if you are an Argentinian, but you have done your PhD, let's say in the UK, you cannot apply to do your postdoc in Argentina. You cannot have been in the same host lab or the same host country for more than 12 months by the time you activate the fellowship. This is to do with us trying to promote mobility and to have people, you know, leave their current host lab or the current the current country. I think one more formal criteria is also if you are a national of a member country. Currently, HFSP has 15 member countries. And if you are a national of that member country, of one of those member countries, you can apply to move everywhere, anywhere in the world. But if you're not a national of a member country, for example, Argentina is until now not a member country. So as an Argentinian national, you could only apply to work in a country that is a member of HFSPO. But then, of course, we also have much flexibility in the third year of the fellowship. For example, after 2 years, you can first of all interrupt the fellowship. We call this deferral. You can interrupt it for 1 year, and within this year, you have to stay in the host lab. And then in the third year, no matter whether you interrupt it or not, the third year you can always take up in any country you want. You can also go back to your home country. So if you as an Argentinian do your postdoc in the US for 2 years, and then for the third year you decide to move back home to, you know, eventually set up your lab in your home country, that's totally doable. So we pay, as you said, a living allowance, which varies from country to country. We pay a yearly research and travel allowance that the fellows can use to buy equipment, computers, reagents, but they can also use it to attend scientific meetings and to travel. We pay a child allowance, of course. If you have children, we pay per child per month. It's about 10 to 12% of the monthly living allowance. Then we pay 3 months of parental leave for either the father or the mother. It's not restricted to the mother. So that's three months of full pay. And the fellowship will then be extended by the same amount of time at the end. We pay a relocation allowance if fellows move. And there is also the possibility of a no-cost extension at the end of the 3 years or at the end of the 2 years, no matter, or if you defer. And during this no-cost extension, while you don't get the living allowance anymore, you can still spend the research and travel allowance. So we have one call for applications every year. And so the application site will be open in the beginning of July, and then you have until 24th of August to submit your application. That's why you can't access it now, because last year's is finished. So what you will have to provide is, you know, all your personal data, a CV, your publication record, but that can also be updated until November each year. And then you have to submit an abstract and a research plan, which is usually like maybe 2 or 3 pages long, and some more information. And then you also need to provide 2 letters of references from former mentors, for example, from your PhD supervisor, and a letter of reference from your proposed host supervisor. But that's all. Well, as I said in the beginning, we're very interested in attracting applications from people outside the life sciences, like physicists and chemical engineers or whatever. We fund basic research. We do not fund purely applied research. So if you're, for example, applying for or with a proposal that wants to test a certain drug or identify a drug from a large library, that's not within our scope. If you, however, investigate the basic or the fundamental mechanism of a disease or a virus or something like that, that's absolutely within our scope. It's just that we do not support purely applied or purely translationally oriented research. But we do fund basic research, we fund technologically driven research, method development we fund, as long as there is a biological question or a biological question behind it. If in the end, of course, the basic research leads to the development of a drug or a vaccine, that's even better. But it shouldn't start off as just a drug screen.